Hello, good day everyone. I am here to continue the report on narrative research. Before we start, let's have a quick review. What is narrative research? A literary form of qualitative research, narrative research is all about collecting and telling a story or stories in detail. Researchers write narratives about experiences of individuals, describe a life experience, and discuss the meaning of the experience with the individual. Usually, a narrative research design is focused on studying an individual person. The researcher becomes the interpreter of the individual's stories as opposed to a community. Next one, how was it developed? Writers from numerous fields of social science studies claim it, including education. Several trends have influenced its development within the field of education. In 1990, educators Jean Clandini and Michael Connelly provided the first overview for the field of education. There are three factors that influence development that was suggested by Cortázzi in 1993. These are the following. First, an increased emphasis on teacher reflection. Second, more emphasis placed on teachers' knowledge. And third, educators seeking to bring teachers' voices to the forefront by empowering teachers to talk about their experiences from Creswell 2012. Third one, when to use narrative design. When someone is willing to tell their story, it follows a chronology, and the researcher wants to write it. The writer can write it in a persuasive literary form while presenting a qualitative approach. The researcher seeks out information through interviews, family stories, journal, field notes, letters, autobiography, conversations, photos, and other artifacts. Lastly, why do we use narrative research? According to Michael Margolis, he shares what it means to think in narrative. He notes that recent brain research has identified a gene unique to humans that allow us to tell stories from person to person and generation to generation. Arts, business, and education are all rooted in storytelling. Margolis notes anthropology research that over 70% of what we learn is via story. Narrative thinking provides the storytelling vocabulary, which allows us to make sense and meaning of the world around us. These are all important for narrative research. Now let's have the continuation on the types of narrative research. The previous reporter already gave the different types of narrative research. In addition to that, narrative research takes on multiple forms. It is an overarching category. Each type has its own structure for conducting the study that is recognizable by faculty, journal reviewers, and book publishers. For those reading a narrative study, it is less important to know what type of narrative is being used and more important to recognize the essential characteristics of the types from Creswell 2012. I have here 5 helpful questions in determining your narrative type of study. First question is, who writes or records the story? The individual is a basic distinction of the research. Writing and recording the experiences of another is a biography. When the individual who is writing is the subject of the study, it is called an autobiography. Second question is, how much of a life is recorded and presented? This is a distinction among narrative studies. Writing about an individual's entire life is something done by an anthropologist, a life history. In education, narrative studies usually not about an entire life. They focus on a single event or episode in an individual's life. This type of narrative is known as personal experience story. Third question is, who provides the story? You can identify the type of narrative research by closely examining who provides the story. This is very relevant to education. Examples are teachers' stories, could be personal accounts of their own classroom experiences. The fourth one is a theoretical lens being used. What is theoretical lens? A theoretical lens in narrative research is a guiding perspective or an ideology that provides structure for groups or individuals in the written report. The researcher provides a voice for the individual who is seldom heard in an educational research. The last one, can narrative forms be combined? Absolutely, yes. There are research where ideas cannot be combined. For narrative research, one or more ideas can be combined. So what are the characteristics of a narrative research? We have here the following. First, individual experiences. Understanding an individual's history or past experiences will help explain the impact on their present and future experiences. Next one, we have chronology of the experiences. A time sequence or chronology of events help readers understand and follow the research. Third, collecting individual stories. Stories can be acquired throughout various means including interviews, informal observations, conservations, journals, letters, or even memory boxes. All are examples of field text. The fourth one we have re-storying. Re-storying is also known as retelling or remapping. It is the process of gathering stories, reviewing them for key elements just like time, place, plot, and theme, and rewriting the story in a chronological sequence. Other key elements include characters, setting, actions, problems, and resolution. They provide the reader a background information. Fifth on the list, coding for themes. Data can be coded into themes or categories. About 5 to 7 themes are identified and can be incorporated into passages of the story or in a separate section. Last one we have context or setting. It describes in detail the place where the story physically occurs. A good research should be well adjusted, well planned, appropriately designed, and ethically approved. Ethical integrity is essential to writing and publication. Often, ethical issues arise when it is difficult to prioritize or accommodate and reconcile between different principles, values, and or moral beliefs. Ethical issues may also arise when principles and values conflict with one another. Important ethical issues to consider while writing includes ownership, validity, and participant itself. First issue, validity. Since narrative research depends heavily on the data collected from participants' stories, the validity of the story can greatly impact the outcome. Participants may present a false story or purposefully distort the real story. This results in false data being used for the narrative research. Participants may also be unable or may be unwilling to give the complete story due to their experiences, maybe a trauma or limitations on their memory. One thing researchers should always remember and be aware of this issue, and so they can potentially compensate by correlating data from multiple resources, fact-checking, and as much as possible, a more careful review of the participants. Second ethical issue, ownership. Narratives may involve people or events that the researcher does not have permission to tell. The issue of ownership can be very complex and can lead to delays or unintended consequences of the research. Researchers should try to seek the permission not only of the participants but also of the people that the narrative research may directly impact. Additionally, the researcher runs the risk of transposing their own perspective for that of the participants. The act of restoring can inadvertently cause the loss of the participant's voice. Using direct quotes from the participant and careful attention to the settings and events told can help to alleviate loss of perspective. We have the third and last ethical issue on the list, participant impacts. Due to the social nature of many narrative research studies, participants can be negatively impacted by participation. This can occur either directly by being identified within the study or indirectly by the influence a research report may have on their culture or lifestyle. Researchers can create a more composite narrative if there are multiple participants or at least anonymize the participants. The researcher must be aware that the relationship between the researcher and the participants should be reciprocal. Researchers should not only be the one to gain, they should give back in some other way.